Good afternoon, everyone. The time is 1 o'clock. Welcome to the January 28th, 1 p.m. hearing of the Committee on Housing. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. In the unlikely event that we have to abruptly end this hearing due to technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business at 1 p.m. on January 30th in this room 225, and a public notice will be posted on the legislature's website. We will be enforcing a 60-second per testifier time limit. If there are temporary technical glitches during your turn to testify via Zoom, we may have to move on to the next person due to time constraints. We appreciate your understanding and remind you that the committee has your written testimony. Our first bill today is Senate Bill 27 relating to housing, which exempts state-financed housing developments from the requirement to obtain approval from the applicable county council. Our first testifier is HHFTC with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair. Being the County Director of HHFTC, we stand on our testimony providing comments.
Thank you. Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting in opposition. Hawaii Appleseed in support. Housing Hawaii's Future in support. Maui Chamber of Commerce in support. Lahaina Strong in opposition. Hawaii Good Neighbor in opposition.
I'm not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. Trevor Nagamine in support. Seth Kamemoto, Demiliza Saramozing, Tamara Paulton, Jolyn Okimoto, all in opposition. Robin Knox in opposition. Ellen Sofio in opposition.
Also not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. Brett Kurashige in opposition. Makana Hicks in opposition.
Also not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. Terry Yoshinaga in opposition. Sage Lee Medeiros Garcia in opposition. And all in opposition, Janice Mitchell, Jacqueline Wah, Kelly Nishimura, Whitney Bozel, and Summer Yadao. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 27? Please.
Aloha. Senate Housing Committee, Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of Rura Cares. So I would just comment. I neither support nor oppose. This is involving the counties. So a proposed amendment for consideration is under number 1. The housing projects meets the following conditions, that it also meets the minimum requirements of health, safety, and environmental standards. So you could be a little bit more technical there, because in the state of Hawaii, we want to be more aware of natural resources, EV kapuna, and underlying issues of Hawaiian priorities and concerns to building housing. And so also there's also the provided further that the projects are exempt from legislative body county approval, and yet the land use commission approves. So I'm just wondering how the counties can have assurance that the state buildings are within zoning codes and standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 27? Okay, thank you. If you're going to say anything, you'll need to step forward.
OPST, Seiji Ogawa from OPST, Office of Planning Sustainable Development. Mainly, our testimony is about just finding ways to expedite permitting instead of just jumping through the approval process from all government agencies. Kind of written out. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 27? Okay, if not, we'll move to our next measure, which is Senate Bill 38, relating to housing. Prohibits the legislative body of a county from making modifications to housing development proposals that would increase the cost of the project. Our first testifier is HHFTC support.
So we stand in support.
followed by Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting in opposition. We'll welcome Vice Chair Hashimoto. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in support. NIOP Hawaii chapter in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Evan Oy on behalf of NIOP Hawaii. We strongly support this measure. A measure like this really helps de-risk the development process. And, especially during this, high-risk development time with rising interest rates, rising insurance costs, those all factor into the risk assessment when you take a look at an affordable housing project. So we just, appreciate the intent of this measure and support the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Maui Chamber of Commerce in support. Lahaina Strong in opposition. Hawaii Good Neighbor in opposition. Housing
Not
Hawaii. Not present, thank you. Housing Hawaii's Future in support. Sandy Wong in support. In opposition, Seth Kamemoto, Tamara Paulton, Jolyn Okimoto, Robin Knox, Ellen Sofio, Dave Watase, Brett Kurashige, Janice Mitchell, Bianca Isaki, Makana Hicks, Kelly Nishimura, and Whitney Bozel. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 38? Maybe not. If not, members, any questions? Okay. I actually have a question for HHFTC. Actually, on the previous bill, for projects that your agency finances, how much money do you usually put in?
Well, it varies widely depending on the number of units and source of financing.
Could you give us a range?
Or for example, for projects that just use a DERF interim loan, for example, might be $10 to $20 million. For projects using LIHTC funding, what is your estimate, David, about average?
The annual infusion for LIHTC would probably be about $3 million per project per year over 10 years. So that would be credit equity subsidy of probably about 28, 30 million. Equity on a 4% LIHTC would represent about 40% of the cost. On a 9%, it's about 60%, but those are subsidies. For RHRF, we would probably put in approximately, I would say, maybe 20% of the gap funding for the project. So that could range in the area of $150,000 a unit per project.
Do you ever provide nominal financing for projects?
What would you consider nominal financing?
Well, we do.
An insignificant amount of financing?
Well, typically, developers wouldn't apply if it's not a meaningful amount to them.
What's the lowest amount per unit that you've awarded?
Well, that would probably be for DERF interim loans where, let's say, let me think of the most recent projects. We provide pre-development funds of, say, $5 million for a 300-unit project. That's typically a construction loan.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Okay, if not, thank you. We'll move on to Senate Bill 25 relating to housing, which authorizes a county to reduce the number of housing units that may be built in any portion of the county only if the county increases the number of housing units that may be built elsewhere in the county such that there is no net loss in residential capacity. We have the Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting in opposition. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 25? Okay, is the Attorney General here? All right, we'll move forward to our next measure, Senate Bill 70, relating to housing, which requires eligible applicants of the Rental Housing Revolving Fund to be either government agencies or organizations that are required to use all financial surplus to develop additional housing in the state. First testifier is HPHA in support.
Not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. HHFDC with comments.
Yes, Chair, we provided comments. We think most developers would not have an issue with reinvesting financial surplus into additional housing projects. I think the question that we have is enforcement of this condition. For example, how would we monitor that funds that are, or financial surplus derived from our project would be reinvested into subsequent housing projects? We did follow up with your office on additional comments suggesting that a definition of financial surplus would be helpful for this bill. We've sent that to your office. But we still do feel that it would be good to talk to the developers to see how this bill could be enforced, how it could be ensured that financial surplus would be reinvested into future projects.
Thank you. NIOP Hawaii chapter in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Evan Oye on behalf of NIOP Hawaii. Chair, we just wanted to voice our concerns with SB 70 as it does exclude private, for-profit developers by restricting the eligibility for RHRF. We're concerned that it would exclude a lot of partners who have been critical for the development of affordable housing here in Hawaii, and it may impact the ability to produce at scale. So we respectfully wanted to voice those concerns at this time. So we'll be available for any questions, so Chair.
Thank you. Catholic Charities Hawaii in opposition.
Hello, Chair and Vice Chair. I'm Betty Lou Larson with Catholic Charities Hawaii. We're respectfully opposed to this bill, mainly because we feel that it allows or it enforces that the Rent Housing Revolving Fund would be used by only two entities, government entities, organizations committed to put all their financials surplus for their housing. We are very concerned, as you are, about permanent affordability. That is our main concern. We don't see these projects really throwing off a lot of money until the affordability might expire. Then they could be sold. Then they're in great locations, they're downtown, they're very valuable projects. So the affordability to us is the criteria that we'd want to pay attention to and try to, in the future, make sure that they stay affordable. And that means monies of the entity and maybe even the state would have to be put in to make sure they're in good condition after 60 years. Our concern is, again, as HHFDC said, how would you implement this 60 or 100 years from now? If you have a mainland developer, you have even a local developer who's doing a lot of projects, some this, some not. How could you, enforce this and be accurate?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next, we have Galen Fox in support and Seth Kamemoto with comments. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 70? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Senate Bill 71 relating to the Rental Housing Revolving Fund, which amends the preference criteria and eligibility requirements for applicant developers seeking assistance from the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. Before we get into this, Chair just wants to note that because this next bill and the following bill, Senate Bill 163 relating to the Rental Housing Revolving Fund, both have similar subject matters. It's the Chair's intent to defer Senate Bill 163 and instead make some amendments to Senate Bill 71 and use that as the vehicle to address the prioritization of the funding from the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. Our first testifier is Hawaii Public Housing Authority in support.
Not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. HHFDC with comments.
HHFDC stands on his comments.
NIOP Hawaii chapter in opposition.
Aloha, Chair, again, we just wanted to voice our concerns again on SB 71. Similar concerns in regards to, this precludes, developers from being able to participate as well as, I think there's other provisions in here such as the shorter term limits and in regards to no longer than 5 years. The short-term loan terms can create undue financial burden on developers as affordable housing projects typically require longer loan amortization periods and to remain financially viable. And then another one is going to be, the providing preference for projects in perpetual affordability. While we appreciate this goal, this may disincentivize developers from pursuing projects due to the long-term financial risk and the operational burdens associated with this kind of agreement. So, we respectfully wanted to voice those concerns, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our next testifier is Catholic Charities Hawaii in opposition.
Chair and Vice Chair, respectfully oppose this bill. Be it fast. We feel that although we support very much so the state and county projects, as we say in our next testimony, we feel that these should be directly funded or in some mechanism so that there's more transparency rather than mixing in with TOD or within, LIHTC and others. So there's another way to fund these and make sure they get built, which is important. Loan terms, very difficult. How could a low-income project do this? They'd be locked out. The rents don't sustain it. They can't pay rents that would pay back a loan in 5 years. I also want to say we're very concerned again about the deletion of all the other priorities, especially the 5% for units targeting people at 30% AMI below. As we say, many of the tenants, in elderly projects, over half of the tenants, it's as high as 60% of the tenants are at 30% AMI below. So we need to continue looking at this population and not reducing the mandate for the few units that actually do target them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, we have Seth Kamemoto with comments. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 71? Do members, any questions? I have a question for HHFTC. As you know, the chair is very interested in revolving the rental housing revolving fund faster than it currently is. Is a tier 2 loan term, what is a typical term of a tier 2 loan?
I believe in the pilot project that we had 2 years ago, the loan terms were up to, was it 53 years? But we also worked with developers to prioritize what that could pay back the loan quicker. So some, we expect them to pay back the loan in under 40 years, say between 30 and 40 years.
What's the typical term for a tier 1 loan?
That'll be about 50, that'll be longer, 55 to 60 years. So the tier 2, just to add to what my director said, it's really the loan term that they are provided. Most of the projects will pro forma out to pay off those loans significantly sooner than their original term is.
Both you and Catholic Charities have testified as to the presence of 30% AMI tenants in these 60% AMI units. How many of them are Section 8 voucher holders?
I don't have that information offhand right now, but we can work on getting that for you, and we can work with the Housing Authority to get that information.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much. The next bill is Senate Bill 163, relating to the Rental Housing Revolving Fund, which requires HHFDC to maximize the amount of housing built that utilizes loans from the Rental Housing Revolving Fund by prioritizing projects with the shortest projected loan repayment terms that produce the highest number of units per dollar per year, and repeals all other priorities and preferences for projects utilizing the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. As I previously stated, the inclination of the chair is to defer this measure and to make amendments to SB 71 addressing the concerns raised in this measure. Hawaii Public Housing Authority in support.
Not present on Zoom, Chair.
Thank you. HHFDC with comments.
Testimony offering comments.
NIOP Hawaii chapter in opposition. Catholic Charities Hawaii in opposition.
Larson with Catholic Charities. even though this is a slightly different bill, many of the issues, as you see, are coming up in other bills. So I want to take this opportunity to say this really concerns us because it erodes the whole purpose of the LIHTC program. We feel that it doesn't really support the people that it was designed for. This one, for example, would have, someone could win an award at serving people at 140% AMI. They could pay back a loan, but because they have much, much, much higher rents, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a month versus $1,000 a month for a senior project. So we feel that those things and we just feel that the current priorities could be improved. There's more discussion for sure, but that they protect and provide guardrails for the people in our state so that low-income, middle-income people at 60% of the tier 2 have some targeted effort by the state to really look at housing and how to accomplish this. We need more, we definitely need more discussion on how to address this, but we feel that removing these guardrails without that discussion is just not the right thing to do at this time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on SB 163? Okay, if not, we'll move forward to our next measure, Senate Bill 165 relating to housing, which clarifies the definition of qualified nonprofit housing trust to specify organizations that exclusively serve residents, qualified residents as defined in section 201H-32 HRS. Our first testifier is HHFDC in support. Thank you. Next is HOU Collaborative in support. Thank you, and we have Galen Fox in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 165? If not, members, any questions? Okay, our next measure is Senate Bill 379 relating to affordable housing. Requires that the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation housing projects include a restrictive covenant that states that the units designated as affordable housing, as described in the submitted project application, shall remain as affordable housing in perpetuity and prohibits development of affordable housing in a special flood hazard area. Our first testifier is HPHA in support.
HPHA stands in support.
HHFDC with comments.
Yes, Chair, we have comments on this bill. We are particularly concerned about the impact this measure may have on for sale 201H projects. These projects are many times largely privately financed, and developers may be unwilling to take the risk of going through a 201H process if they are uncertain that are buyers willing to commit to a project. You know, they have to go through a pre-sale process, and many buyers may hesitate to commit to a perpetual affordability requirement. So this could affect marketability and sales for sale projects, which could lead to them not proceeding. And we also ask that the provision relating to special flood hazard zones, that be deleted, because under 201H38, we cannot contravene any public health or safety standards. So we would not allow a project that created a flood risk.
Thank you. Our next testifier is Aloha United Way in support. NIOP Hawaii in opposition. Maui Chamber of Commerce with comments. Ashley Loa in support. Seth Kamemoto in support. Lowell Chun in opposition. And Jen Mather with comments. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 379?
Aloha, Chair. My name is Jermaine Myers. I'm a Native Hawaiian OHA beneficiary. I oppose Senate Bill 379 regarding affordable housing, and I ask Chair and the members of the committee to vote no in opposition of Senate Bill 379. The bill amends Section 201H-38 so that affordable housing cannot be developed within a special flood hazard area as identified on the current FEMA flood insurance rate map. Many oceanfront properties in Hawaii are identified in the special flood hazard map area. High-income residents esteem housing development on oceanfront properties. This bill will eliminate the opportunity for low and moderate income residents to live in affordable housing that should also be allowed to be built on oceanfront properties. My final concern is that OHA's Kaka'ako Makai properties are also in the special flood hazard area as identified by FEMA for our maps. If this bill passes, OHA's goal to develop Section 201H affordable workforce housing, as noted in Senate Bill 534, will be nullified. I humbly ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 379? Any questions, members? Okay, if not, our next measure is Senate Bill 378, relating to the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, which establishes a working group within HHFDC to identify existing mixed-use developments in Maui County that could be acquired by HHFDC for use as affordable housing and commercial rental leases, and requires a report to the legislature. Our first testifier for SB 378 is HHFDC in support. Thank you. Our next testifier is Maui Chamber of Commerce in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 378?
Angela Melody Young, Roar Cares. So in strong support, my mother is a real estate agent for Century 21 Properties, and I'm in training. I already passed my class test. So I love learning about this industry and supporting Maui, of course, because as a member of the public and an American citizen concerned about federal dollars supporting Maui, I'd like to speak up for Maui and the housing and development goes. So my proposed amendment will be under the members, number 8, a representative of the real estate market, a representative of the financial assets management industry, a representative of the business management organizations, focus on real estate marketing strategies and career development trainings. So I think this is more inclusive and provides a little bit more equity and representation for the real estate industry. Because a lot of times when I talk to my real estate teacher, they're like, we don't even know what these terminologies mean. We don't even know what average medium income is. We don't know what like rental housing revolving fund is. They don't even know these like real estate people. And then also, if you notice, it says invited by the president and speaker of the House. I think we need a little bit more equity and representation in the marketplace. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 378? Okay, any questions, members? If not, our next measure is Senate Bill 414, relating to restoring access to disaster-affected areas, which requires HHFDC to institute proceedings to condemn certain lands in Lahaina to build a new access road from Keawe Street to the Kilohana and Kalaiola sites developed in the villages of Leali'i, appropriates monies into and out of the dwelling unit revolving fund for the appraisals and other preparations for the condemnation proceedings. Our first testifier is HHFDC in support. Department of Human Services in support. Maui Chamber of Commerce in support. And Jen Mather in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on SB 414? If not, members, any questions? Okay, and that brings us to the last measure on our agenda, SB 123, relating to taxation, which eliminates the home mortgage interest deduction for second homes under Hawaii income tax law and requires reports to the legislature. First testifier is Hawaii Department of Taxation with comments. Department of Budget and Finance with comments. Hawaii Realtors in opposition. Tax Foundation of Hawaii with comments. Maui Chamber of Commerce with comments.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika for Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We have comments on the measure relating to the complexity that this bill will create. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maui Chamber of Commerce with comments. And Constance B in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 123?
Apologies, Chair, Vice Chair. On behalf of the Department of Taxation, just reiterate that we're here to comment for the questions.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on SB 123? Okay, if not, any questions, members? Okay, if not, we'll be going into recess and we'll be back for decision making. Welcome back. The Housing Committee is now back for its January 28th agenda. I'd like to welcome committee members Kanuha and Aquino at this time. We'll start our decision-making with Senate Bill 27 relating to housing. Chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments to include HHFDC's amendment to include projects receiving a financing commitment from the state. We'll also note in the committee report that these projects must still go through an extensive process to receive 201H-38 approval, and also that HHFDC does not provide nominal financing for projects, and that typical state financing constitutes a large portion of a project's cost. Members, any questions or discussion? Okay, so if not, for Senate Bill 27 relating to housing, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 27, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes aye. Senator Aquino. Aye. Senator Kanuha. Aye. And Senator Favela is excused, and for all other measures, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. Next, for Senate Bill 38 relating to housing, the Chair's recommendation is to pass this measure with amendments. There are technical non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity and consistency, and also we'll be taking HHFDC's recommendation to modify section C1 on page 2, provided that the legislative body shall not make any modifications or impose conditions that will increase the cost of the project. Members, any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, SB 38, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 38, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Members, any one voting with reservations, any members voting no, with all others voting aye, recommendations adopted.
Next, for Senate Bill 25 relating to housing, Chair's inclination was to address the concerns about the vagueness of a portion of a county, but we didn't get any suggestions to reword that from the Attorney General. So Chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure unamended. Do we have any questions or discussion, members? Okay, if not, for SB 25, Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended. Chair votes aye.
Members, recommendation for SB 25 is passed unamended. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. For Senate Bill 70 relating to housing, Chair's recommendation is to pass this measure with amendments to take HHFDC's, to insert language to address HHFDC's concern about financial surplus. And we'll also add a preamble noting the need for this bill given the nearly 15,000 affordable housing units whose affordability restrictions expire by the year 2100. In one prominent example, Kukui Gardens, which was built in 1970 with subsidized federal loans, when affordability restrictions expired, the state was compelled to buy back the project from the owner for $132.5 million in 2006 to preserve the tenants in place. The owner then used the proceeds of the sale to fund other non-housing related charitable donations. This bill is needed to ensure that the value generated by taxpayer-financed housing development is recycled to build more housing. In the committee report, we'll also note that the bill does not prohibit for-profit development and that Vienna's successful social housing model is based on such for-profit developers, which are called limited profit housing associations. Members, any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, for Senate Bill 70 relating to housing, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, recommendation is SB 70 is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair votes with reservations. Any members, others voting with reservations or noes? Seeing none, recommendations adopted.
Thank you. Our next bill is SB 71 relating to the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. As I previously mentioned, we'll be making some amendments to this to incorporate some of the concerns that were also raised in the next bill, SB 163. So again, the Chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments. The Chair wants to add a preamble on the extreme housing shortage that Hawaii faces. However, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund, the primary state means of financing new housing, produces new housing extremely inefficiently. It requires spending roughly $200,000 of state taxpayer funds per unit, typically to be repaid at only 0.15% interest over 57 years. RHRF financed units are typically only affordable for up to 61 years, and almost 15,000 units will expire by the year 2100. Those 15,000 families will likely be evicted as rents rise to market unless the state and counties buy back the buildings, which means that taxpayers would have to pay twice for the same building. Because of these attractive terms, it now finances half of all housing production statewide, crowding out all other forms of housing finance, including from the private sector. Furthermore, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund is overbuilding rental housing at the 60% AMI level. HHFDC's 2019 Hawaii Housing Planning Study forecasts demand over the 5 years from 2020 to 2025 of only 1,789 units of 50 to 60% AMI rentals, or 358 units per year, which is almost exclusively what comprises LIHTC projects. HHFDC is currently financing well over 1,000 LIHTC units per year. Due to such dramatic overbuilding of this narrow market segment, over 30% of LIHTC units are being rented by tenants at 30% AMI who are severely cost burdened as a result. The same study forecasts a demand of 1,855 units of 120 to 140% AMI rentals over the same 5-year period, or 371 units per year. By contrast, there is demand for 11,872 ownership units at 120% of AMI and up over the same 5-year period, or 2,374 units per year, far more than the market is currently supplying. This measure is intended to provide financing to provide enough housing to meet demand at Tier 1 and Tier 2 AMI segments, while enabling surplus funds to be used to produce housing in the most efficient means possible, greatly increasing housing production. In addition, we want to insert sections 1, 2, 3, and 5 of SB 164 to rename the Rental Housing Revolving Fund the State Housing Revolving Fund, and to permit it to be used for ownership housing, to delete the word rental from HRS 201H-202 so that the fund may finance both rental and for sale housing, to amend HRS 201H-202E such that Tier 1, which is 201H-202E1 and 2, apply to awards up to the annual number of units that HHFDC's most recent Hawaii Housing Planning Study forecasts is needed for 50 to 60% AMI rental housing, that Tier 2, or 201H-202E3, applies up to awards up to the annual number of units that HHFDC's most recent Hawaii Housing Planning Study forecasts is needed for 120 to 140 AMI rental housing, inserting a new Tier 3, which applies to housing exclusively for qualified residents as defined in HRS 201H-32. In addition, we have technical non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity and consistency, and we'll also be taking HHFDC's suggestion to provide for establishing an application process for fund allocation that prioritizes any and all of the listed criteria. So it will read, B, the corporation shall establish an application process for fund allocation. Preference shall be given to projects meeting any of the following criteria, and inserting a new criteria into 201H-204B, projects requiring the least amount of state funding per unit per year. Members, do we have any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, for SB 71, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 71, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair votes with reservations. Any members voting with reservations or noes? Seeing none, all others vote aye. Recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Our next bill is Senate Bill 163 relating to the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. As I previously mentioned, we'll be deferring this measure because the concerns will be addressed in the amended SB 71. Any discussion or questions? Okay, our next bill is Senate Bill 165 relating to housing. Chair's recommendation is to pass this measure unamended. Any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, SB 165, Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended. Chair votes aye.
SB 165, Chair's recommendation is passed unamended. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Senate Bill 379 relating to affordable housing. Again, the chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure unamended. Do we have any questions or discussion, members? Okay, if not, SB 379, chair's recommendation is to pass unamended. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 379, Chair's recommendation is passed unamended. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendation is adopted.
Next measure is Senate Bill 378 relating to HHFDC. Again, the chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure unamended. Any discussion or questions? SB 378, chair's recommendation is to pass unamended. Chair votes aye.
SB 378, Chair's recommendation is passed unamended. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Senate Bill 414 relating to restoring access to disaster-affected areas. Chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments, with technical, non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity and consistency. Any discussion or questions? If not, Chair's recommendation for Senate Bill 414 is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 414, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendations adopted.
And finally, Senate Bill 123 relating to taxation. The Chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments, to take SMA's technical, non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity and consistency. We'll also note in the committee report, the Department of Taxation's concerns about the inability to provide certain types of information, such as the amount of revenue that would be gained. Members, any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, Senate Bill 123, recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 123, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendations adopted.
Thank you very much. With there being no further business, this hearing is adjourned.